Welcome to FoundHer Rising, the podcast for women founders in wellness coaching and consulting who are ready to build businesses that create freedom, impact, and income. I'm your host, Christine Hakkola, business coach, former psychotherapist, and mentor to women scaling service-based businesses. Today, I'm joined by Alejandra Ramirez, internal communications strategist and founder of Ready Cultures. She helps organizations use clear communication to align teams and build strong workplace culture. Alejandra, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's so great to have you here. I can't wait to dive in and share with our listeners all about your business journey. But let's start with what you do and what drove you
Sure.
to make the leap from the corporate communications world into running your own business.
Yeah, so I run a consultancy called Ready Cultures and work with companies, small, large, big, ginormous, any size, any industry, who are looking to improve their culture through internal communications. And
Awesome.
specifically, I do internal communications because I'm a big believer that through clear communication, you can get better alignment and
Mm,
provide more clarity for people. And that is
oh
sort of a
gosh.
win-win for all involved.
Yeah, you're
So I
speaking my
work really
language.
closely with them. Yeah.
I love that and just love the work you do. What was it, I don't know if it was like a point in time or if it's a longer story that made you really take that shift from the corporate world and decide like I need to do this in the context of my own business?
There wasn't any one solid moment.
Yeah.
I think it was sort of a little bit of a collection of things over
Mhm.
time. And, um, I was very fortunate that when I was in-house, I had, really lovely, excellent bosses who sort of taught me what to do.
Mhm.
And I would hear about the horror stories and or, indirectly through, where I worked, other people, other teams and saw, what not to do. And I've always really enjoyed writing. When I was younger, I thought I'd be a journalist or maybe become a
Mm,
lawyer, which is how I ended up
nice.
working in law firms for so long and
Yeah.
running their corporate communications functions.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm also an empath at heart. Like I'm a very highly sensitive, empathetic Pisces. And I found that I've always been fascinated with just how people communicate and how people
Yeah.
work. And so after several years of talking about maybe doing something different, whatever different
Mhm.
meant, 2023 just felt like the right time to try that something different. And after discussing with my husband and talking about how I was ready for a change,
Mhm.
he was just like, "Why don't you go off on your own? You talk about doing something different all the time. Just go do it." And I was like, "Oh my gosh. Okay, sure. Let's
Amazing.
just do it." So that's how it started.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
almost 3 years in, I'm still here.
And doing quite well.
Yeah.
I love that you had the support and maybe even the little nudge from your husband. If you could say a little bit about so, like, I'm imagining there's entrepreneurs or people wanting to be entrepreneurs listening, and one of the things that I hear from folks is what they didn't anticipate is, they're so good at their craft, they are skilled at the service they provide, but then they get into running their own business and they don't realize the differences between delivering the service versus running the business. What were some of the early lessons or surprises for you when you shifted into running your own business?
I love this question, and it's something I still am figuring out a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's I would say that when I worked in-house, um, I was what you would consider a high performer, and I was lucky enough that right when I started to get bored in sort of the work I did, I
Yeah.
got promoted or my role
Amazing.
shifted or
Yeah.
something, and I think my bosses were just like, "All right, let's give her something else to do."
Right.
She's,
You need a new project.
um and when I went off on my own, one of the hardest things for me was to learn that no one really knows what they're doing and
Yeah.
realize that
It's so
that
true.
and realize that it's okay to just kind of figure it out. And I think
Yeah.
having worked in house, I was used to structure and this is how you
Mhm.
do things. And um I had someone telling me what to do, even though I'm kind of Miss Independent, and my husband makes so much fun of me because I'm always like, no, I can do it myself. Um, I had someone telling me what to do. I had a steady paycheck. I had these things
Yeah,
that just kind of made doing the work easy and fun.
yeah. Sometimes we can
And
take for granted all of that built-in
yeah,
structure that comes with working for somebody else.
absolutely. And so when I went off on my own, I realized quickly it wasn't enough to just know how to do the work. I had to
Mhm.
actually sell the work, and I had to actually make it something that could be, reproduced over time. And
Yeah.
it make it something that wasn't just figuring it out every single time. And so,
Mhm.
um, it was tough. It was something that I still sometimes am like, "Oh, right, I'm the boss, and what am I doing today?" kinda thing. So,
Yeah, yeah,
it's definitely a very different skill set,
yeah.
it's you hear a lot as a founder, or at least I did when I spoke to people about this idea of feast and famine, which,
Mhm.
is a terrifying thing to think
Yes.
about,
It comes
but
up
it
all the
really.
time as an entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah, and so it really teaches you how to really be strategic from a,
Mhm.
you know, business perspective, where I think when I was in-house, as much as I understood the business perspective and sort of
Yeah.
understood the strategy, um, living it is a very different story when it
Yeah.
comes to being, a team of one.
Agreed, agreed. And you mentioned the difference, and the insight you gleaned between doing the work and selling the work. For you, what would you say was the hardest or most challenging part about this experience of now having to sell the work?
Ooh, honestly, it was confidence and
Mm,
knowing that I knew you trusting that I knew what I was talking about. And it,
yeah,
it came from a place of, I think, always just having or always just not having to sell and just being like, "Yep, this is what I do," and or not really having
yeah,
to even explain what I did. And then when I went
yeah,
off on my own, I mean, look, I was fortunate enough that very quickly when I started, I reached out to, my network, and very quickly landed pretty decent number of, gigs, so to speak, while I
yeah,
figured it out. But
yeah.
I think the selling just felt very foreign to me and very
Mhm.
uncomfortable. I am someone who is I listen, I worked in comms my whole career. I am used to
Yeah.
putting
Like
others in
you're
the
an expert at
spotlight.
communication.
Right, I'm an expert at communication, and I'm used to putting others in the spotlight, right? Like, I promoted
Exactly.
others, and
Yeah.
so
Yes.
stepping into that spotlight just felt like the most awkward thing in the world. And
Yeah.
so it just took trial and error and figuring out what
Mhm.
worked and asking questions and being open to feedback and just kind of going with the flow, and also
Mhm.
learning not to overthink it. I think the more I overthinking I
Yeah.
did, the more stuck I got. Whereas if I just kind of
Yes.
figured it out as I went, it naturally just
Yes.
worked better.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious to hear your perspective. One of the conversations that comes up a lot when I speak with fellow entrepreneurs about this is when they do start to get it or gain the confidence and be able to actually sell. One of the shifts that I see folks go through that I personally think is really necessary is this idea that somehow we get of thinking we have to sell ourselves, and really what we're doing is building relationships and just helping folks identify, and for us understanding, what is the problem that you have, am I the right person to solve it, and let's talk
Right.
about how I can help you solve it and get where you want to go. And I'm curious what your experience of that process is, what it's been like.
I would agree with that. I think that at first it's easy to be like, I have to have this brand that's a certain look and feel
Mhm.
and does a certain thing, and you forget to be like, wait, is this even me? And the more conversational my, calls with potential clients were, and the more just asking questions, the better. And I find that one of the and this is something I've always had, which to the point
Mhm.
where, and I can go on a little bit of a tangent in a minute, but um I ask a lot of questions. I'm a very inquisitive person. I like to understand why things are the way they are, or how
Mhm.
things are going to work. And maybe it's part of the communications piece, right? You have to be able
Yeah.
to explain things. You need to understand them.
Mhm.
And so, so much so that my tangent briefly is that when I was a kid, um, so my first name is Maria. In Latin
Mhm.
America, you tend to go by your middle name,
Yeah.
Alejandra,
Uh-huh.
or your full name, Maria, in my case, Maria
Uh-huh.
Alejandra. And so my grandpa used to call me Maria Porque, and Porque is why in Spanish, because he said that
Oh,
I just always asked why. Like it was just like, but
wow.
why and why and why? And so that just became my nickname for my
That's
grandpa.
so
Even like later
sweet.
in life, that's what he called me, and it was just
Yeah.
like a fun
He pegged you as a
thing.
natural communicator, and so as
Yeah,
people barely out of the womb.
exactly. But yeah, I
That's
mean,
incredible.
I think it became I've learned that, and I guess I always did this, but I never really was able to put my finger on it.
Mhm.
Um, is that people want to feel heard.
Yes.
People want to feel understood. And
Mhm.
that's a big part of what I do. I've always done, which is,
Yeah.
putting myself in their shoes to explain whatever it is that needs explaining. Whether it was
So true.
in-house working with the chair of a law firm, prepping him for a media interview and telling him, here's who your readership is. Like, here's who's actually going to be the judge of what you're saying, to now, which is, okay, what are you trying to get across, and why does this matter? And so the
Mhm.
more I I learned very quickly that the more questions I asked, the more
Yeah.
interested clients became, because they realized that I really care about what they are
Yeah.
doing and want to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that was something I figured out fairly quickly, and it was just by nature of the work I've always done that it kind of
Mhm.
helped me very quickly connect those
Yeah.
dots.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things you're speaking to me is this idea, and I've heard it said in a variety of different ways. People don't buy brands and services, they buy relationships and results, right? And what
Always.
you're speaking to, which comes really naturally in how you're wired and the field of work you do, is just being inquisitive, being curious, asking questions, developing understanding and building the relationship. And this isn't a show about selling, but I think it's really important to highlight that that's actually at the crux of it. It's not about selling ourselves. It's about building relationships where people feel heard and understood.
Yeah, and I would
Mhm.
add to that that it's about building authentic relationships, and I know
Yeah.
authentic's been kind of overused lately. Genuine, I guess we can say. That makes a difference too, because
Mhm.
I can tell, even, when someone comes to me, and they're, trying to be and build a relationship, I can tell when it's just, oh, I'm here to sell and I'm just acting
You feel
nice
that.
or whatever. You feel that. And so it has to come naturally, and it has to be something that you also feel good and strong about. I'm a big believer that if there's a connection, it's going to work better than if there's no connection.
Yeah.
And you can't force something, which is why
Mhm.
this is why I have a discovery call at the beginning with clients, which is like
Yeah.
let's just talk. Like, what's going on? Let's figure out,
Mhm.
how I
Yeah.
can help you. And if it's not a good fit, I mean, I've referred people to others who, the
Yeah.
person seemed lovely. It seemed like a really great, project to work on, and there just wasn't a fit. And it wasn't because they were a bad person. It just didn't
Right.
flow. And
It's
I
not a
knew
match.
that it wouldn't work. And so maybe
Mhm.
that's the empath in me, but I just, I
Yeah.
find that those relationships have to be genuine to really work.
Yeah. I think that's really insightful and so important, and it's one of my core philosophies too. I think it's also worth saying out loud that that's one of the reasons so many competing businesses and competing services can exist in the same space. There's lots of clients, lots of customers out there, and when we are, to use that word that you brought up, marketing ourselves authentically, building authentic relationships, we're not going to be a fit for everyone. And it does
Yeah.
help to draw the folks to us that are a right fit, right? And folks that aren't a right fit are going to be a right fit for somebody else. And it sounds like
Yeah.
following that philosophy has worked really well for you.
It has, and it's taught me not to take things personally as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
The
See.
sensitive person in me, at first was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
what did I do wrong?" Or, but it's the way of the world. No one's out there being like, "I hate this person." Or it just it's it's energy, it's vibes, it's it's all these things that
Yes.
I know sound a bit woo-woo, but really make a difference.
They do. I agree. I feel like we could go on about this, but I want to pull it back to the bigger vision of your business. So you've been in business 3 years now. Say a little bit about how your vision has changed from when you first launched your business to now.
I would say that my business has changed. It when I first started, and maybe because I always worked in a service industry, it
Hmm.
was very much, what do I need to do to make sure that this person's happy, and like try to fit myself into their exact needs. And then I
So
very quickly
common.
realized I need to build a business for me, and I need to learn to set boundaries. That doesn't mean I can't provide excellent client service and quality work, but it does mean I need to create my zone of genius
Hmm.
to do the work that I know I do well and can do well, so that
Yeah.
I can deliver in a way that clients are going to be happy, as opposed to trying to create and do everything that the client wants. The client doesn't always know what they want.
Yeah.
And if you let them decide and dictate what's needed, you're just going to run yourself ragged.
Yeah.
And
And
and and I
sometimes what they want is not what they need.
exactly.
I feel that you get that. I really, really appreciate that insight. It is a pattern and something that I see prevalent in almost all new business owners that I meet. Is when we first start our own business, one of the most top of mind things is getting clients. And I think it's really normal and natural and part of the process to adapt ourselves to fit the needs and wants of other people. And like you're sharing, I think what a lot of folks really realize early on is how unsustainable that is, simply because it stretches us thin. It can lead to burnout. And like you were saying earlier, leads to us working with clients that are maybe not a right fit for us, which at the end of the day really does us and the client a disservice. So what I hear you saying is 3 years in is those experiences have really given you clarity to say yes to the work that lights you up and the clients that you feel aligned with, and to say no to the things that really aren't up your alley.
And it's also taught me a lot of patience and a lot of
Mm,
trust in myself, right? And
yeah.
knowing that saying no is okay, and it doesn't mean I'm not gonna, get more work as a result of it.
Right.
So
You'll get more
setting
of the
those
right
boundaries. Exactly.
work.
Exactly. More of the right work.
So, Alejandra, you mentioned early on that one of the challenges you faced was selling, and I think for a lot of folks, that's an ongoing learning curve that we're all on. Is how do we do that authentically, and how do we embrace that part of our job? And now that you are successful, you have clients, you have repeat clients, you have word of mouth referrals. What are some of the challenges 3 years in that maybe you didn't anticipate, or that you're experiencing now that you didn't experience at the beginning?
There's a point at which you need to learn to operationalize and automate or
Mhm.
systematize,
Yes.
because there are certain repeatable things that you can do well consistently, but can
Mhm.
take up a lot of time. And
Uh-huh.
if you can learn to think about what those are and think about how you can invest in those areas so that you can continue to focus on your zone of genius.
Mhm.
Um, and I can't take credit for that term, zone of genius. I worked with a woman
I use it all the
who,
time too.
yeah, she's a fractional director of operations. Her name is Ariana. And she taught me a lot about that. And I remember, you know, you think you can do it all, right? You're like, oh,
Mhm.
if I just 5 more minutes, let me do this, just 5 more minutes, and then you realize it's been like 14 hours and you're still
Right,
at it, and you're
exactly.
like,
I
okay,
know
like
that feeling.
I started my business to also have a life. I recognize,
Mhm.
working long hours will happen, but um, once I learned that sometimes you need to invest, right? This idea of
Mhm.
investing is not spending money. It's not wasting money. Um, and that's a big thing when you're your own business, because you're like, every dollar, every penny like goes towards, so like I need to pay my bills. I need to, and at a certain point you need to realize that if you don't invest in systems and tools and people who
Mhm.
can advance whatever efforts you have in
Yeah.
mind, you're going to be stuck in place pretty quickly. You're not going
Yeah.
to grow. And so I was diagnosed with ADHD later in life, which answered
Mhm.
a lot of questions I've always had in
Mhm.
my head. Um, and I've learned that I need I needed an assistant. I was
Yeah.
like, some of the people I talked to who started when I did were like, "No, but I can do all that myself." And I
You
would think about it,
can.
I was like, "But I you can, but I can't." Like, I wanna crawl under my desk and hide when I think about some of this stuff because
Mhm.
I just can't. And so I knew early on, as soon as I knew I was making enough to afford, like a part-time a few hours a week and kinda grow
Yeah.
from there, assistant, it made all the difference. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's an investment, but that pays back. That has paid back in spades because that's time I am no longer having to do things that made me
Exactly.
want to pull my hair out and
Yeah.
like cry.
So well
And
said.
so learning to invest in your business and yourself and others is a
Mhm.
really good big part of running your business and
Yeah.
learning to let go.
Yeah, I agree that that differentiation between investing versus an expense is sometimes hard to wrap your head around at the beginning. One of the pieces of advice an early mentor gave to me that has been incredibly helpful in differentiating the two is she said a good investment should pay for itself within 3 to 6 months. And that can show up in a variety of ways. One being just a direct translation that the investment you're making will earn that money back, whether that's a team member or something else, or the investment buys you back your time so that you can do
Yes.
more activities that earn hopefully more than just break even on your investment, but 3 to
Right.
10x the investment in that. I just want to drill in a little bit more to this piece about operations because I think sometimes, especially when we're newer, this idea of operationalizing, like you said, building systems, processes, we hear the term like SOPs, standard operating procedures, get thrown out. And I think for some newer business owners, that can feel overwhelming or it can even feel disconnected. Like how could I possibly operationalize, a one woman show? Can you give an example? You said you're admin assistant, but anything else in your business that has been really beneficial for you to operationalize?
Yeah, my client onboarding has been a huge one.
Smart.
And what I mean by that is, um, for operationalizing, it would be like, "Oh, hey, let's have a call. Sure, let's schedule it. We'll talk about it." And then, "Okay, let me send you a proposal." And then, "Okay, now you have to sign it. Let me figure out how to get it to you to get
Oh,
it signed.
manual.
Okay, now I need to like save it somewhere. Okay, now what? Like, how am I starting this process?" And
Mhm.
that's a lot of time and energy that you're
It
constantly having
is.
to like reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
So after doing that a few times and learning what worked and what didn't, is like, okay, surely there's a way to just make this automated. And so
Mhm.
I created a system that automates the process. And by automates, I mean, um, you know, now when a client or a potential prospect client
Mhm.
schedules a call, right? They use a scheduling link, or my assistant uses a scheduling link once the times are sorted.
Yeah.
There's a specific name for that specific type of meeting that triggers an automation that starts
Mhm.
setting up what the proposal would look like with the areas I would just need to fill in after the
Amazing.
fact. I
Yeah.
have a standard proposal template that I use
Mhm.
during calls because at the end of the day, I'm doing the same thing. And
You
so,
are.
I can tailor it during the conversation to say, well, based on what you told me, we might want to do more of this. Um, I also systematize by creating standard offerings.
Mhm.
Obviously, I can adjust and always,
Yeah.
will, and have for clients, but at their core, I have 3 core offerings and,
Mhm.
that's what I offer, and I have sort of my set pricing or minimum pricing. And then the automation piece is, if they're on board, I just have to go into my little tool, add in the nuances and personalization with like an intro letter or things like that, send it off with the click of a button. If they're interested, they just hit, yes, click the
Yeah.
thing, hit sign. All
Yeah.
of that gets saved in all the right places. And then I use a tool called ClickUp
I
to
use that
to
too.
do my to use my project management. And so that automated, it creates a project for that client
Yeah.
with the default things I know need to happen at the beginning
Yeah.
of every project. And it's the same with every client. I have
Yeah.
a kickoff call. I have a form that I need them to fill out.
Mhm.
And so I'm no longer having to like pull it from different places. It's
Yeah.
all just in there. And there's always
Awesome.
room for adjustment. It's never going to be
Mhm.
perfect. And
Right.
I'm okay with that. But sort of at their base, those
Yeah.
things are just handled.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And one of the things I want to point out and that I really appreciated about that specific example is sometimes when founders think about operationalizing or automating or outsourcing things, we get stuck in this mindset that it has to be all or nothing, that if I can't outsource or automate or
Yes.
delegate the whole thing, I can't do it. And what's really great about the example you gave is you identified the pieces that you could automate, that could be outsourced, that could be done by software or a template, and there's still lots of room for the human touch and for personalization and for
Yeah.
evolution of the process.
And that's one of the things that my assistant and I talk about often. I mean,
Mm.
anytime we meet, we're thinking, okay, is what you're doing working? Is there a different way of doing it? And I always tell her, like, as you're working on stuff, if you find that you're doing something consistently a certain way, let's write it down so that we're clear on what it is
Fantastic.
that's being done. And you mentioned software. One other example I'll give is, I don't know, at least for me as a new business owner, I always tried the free trials of tools
Uh-huh.
and then eventually maybe buy one and use
Yeah.
different things. And I started keeping a tracker of all of that, of what
Mhm.
what what was a free trial, what for the things I did pay, what were they, how much, how many licenses, all these
Licenses.
things. And it's all in one place and it has
Mhm.
specific criteria and it's automated in ClickUp so that when the renewal date is starting, it sends an automatic reminder to
Fantastic.
me and my assistant to be like, do we want to still use this tool? Are we not using it enough? Do we want to switch from monthly to annually or vice versa?
Mhm.
And that's just one other thing we don't have to like remember to look into. It just
Fantastic.
tells you, hey, this is coming up.
Right.
Do you want to do anything about this? So even little things like that
Yeah.
make a big
I'm just picturing
difference.
people listening going, "Oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that?" It's just I love all these insights. So, speaking of evolution and operationalizing, what is next for your business? When you look into the future, 12 months or 3 years, where do you see your business going?
I say I'm in communications, but I'm in the people business. I think so
Mhm.
many of us are, right? I'm a
Yeah.
huge believer that businesses run on people. And
Mhm.
you hear about, yeah, AI is going to take our jobs. And we heard that when the internet started and when
Yeah.
computers began and I'm in a space that really is about helping businesses and leaders communicate more effectively with employees, sort of bridge that gap between what they think they said and what employees actually hear and act on. And to me, that comes through connection and just talking and, just being human and helping people understand that, especially in times of change, they're not trying to change the people, they're trying to change how the work gets done and then help people
Mhm.
understand it so that they feel part
Yeah.
of it.
So
And
many
so
moving.
I would say for my business, I see myself working with companies who really are looking to make sure that change, transformation, and these big scary words aren't so scary for
Mhm.
all involved.
Yeah.
And also just continuing to build a business for me and knowing my limits and knowing that it's okay to take a break. I remember when I first started my business, that first week. I mean, I took like a week or two off. I took like a couple weeks vacation and then I
Yeah.
was like, oh, the summer's going to be quiet. And I did some outreach and stuff. But then once like I would sit and just sort of, it would be, like a Monday at 2 and I'd just be sitting on the couch and feel so guilty. And like,
Mm.
I'd be like, "But why am I guilty about taking a break? Like, I'm still gonna do the work. I'm a night owl. I work at night sometimes, and I'll take the afternoon to myself. That's okay. No one's telling me
One of the
to do
perks
it
of being
any
self-employed,
differently."
you can structure the work the way you need to.
Exactly, and so that's where I see my business going, is
Mhm.
continuing to serve my needs, so
Yeah.
that I can serve the needs of my clients more effectively.
That's fantastic. I'm hoping that everyone listening is really letting that land because I concur with you. I think it's so important. Alejandra, thank you so much for sharing your story and all these little nuggets of wisdom. I so appreciate you taking the time. If somebody listening wants to find you, connect with you, where is the best place to do that?
LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn, or they can also find me at my website. So it's readycultures.com. There's a link there, and you can send me an email or connect and schedule a call.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alejandra. And thank you, listener, for tuning in to FoundHer Rising. If today's episode resonated with you, follow the show, share it with another founder, and leave a quick review. It helps more women find these conversations. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or learn more at HakkolaHorizons.com. Until next time, keep rising and keep building the business that gives you the freedom to live, lead, and create on your terms.